what is the South Nairn decision? Sorry, the South Nairn plan? It's for 300 houses initially?
Well, the point you're making, and it was made very, very clearly by Mike Henderson at the United Reformed Church that night, there are two separate plans. There's a plan by the consortium, which is Scotia, Robertsons and Barretts, and a plan by Charles Allenby with Muir Evans. We have been repeatedly told by Highland Council to produce a master plan, but as Mike pointed out that night, the Scotia, Robertsons, Barretts is very high density, 320 houses. The Allenby plan is roughly 220 houses, and they overlap, so it's hard to say how many it is. But Allenby's layout is more dispersed, it's better, it looks more typical of what you would expect to see in there. But we haven't even merged them, so we don't know which plan it is we're talking about. The approval that was given, but now not given, at least until we do try and do it again, was for 320 with a break at 100. But if Allenby's 220 is approved, then you're talking 540, 550. But with no infrastructure improvements, so it's just, in my opinion, just not in Nairn's best interest. Until nobody's objecting to it being a suitable site for housing, because I think in a lot of ways there are very good planning reasons for going south to round Nairn off and make it more cohesive. But until you solve the bypass, and until you solve the railway bridge, and until you solve the sewage problems, then it shouldn't be happening.
You're looking at possible 500 houses in there, and as you touched on the infrastructure, especially with the roads at the moment, isn't there going to be 100 houses and then a pause and review?
Yeah, but we don't know what that means, and we don't actually know what's happening. If you look at how Highland Council handled planning over many, many years, it's hard to know that they'll actually impose that. It's hard to believe they'll actually do that. And the trouble about 100 is that you might get to 99 and find that that's far too many, and then you don't have to do anything because you don't build the hundreds. So the congestion stays, the dangers stay, the overloading of the sewage or the overloading of the schools continues, but you don't build any more. And that might be just as simple because there's no more market. So you're never going to build more than 99. But they won't go to 101 if that triggers having to spend money if they don't think it's wise. So to me it's not the answer. To me the answer would be to have a proper planned development from the start and to be sure that the infrastructure is in place. And many of us have been involved, and it's never nice to be involved in this, but the repercussions of some of the fatal accidents in the 96 are still being felt by the people who are the relatives, and particularly the mothers of some of these accidents that happened over many, many years. So it's not something you can just brush aside and say it doesn't matter. So it's really important that we get the bypass. If we have the bypass, it becomes much easier to do the planning. But until that line is decided, until it's actually built, then I would very strongly argue you shouldn't be doing it.
Do you feel that the decisions at the moment that are being made are not in the best interest of Nairn?
I think MD, like yourself, who's watched that video of the Nairn South Planning Committee deciding on Nairn South, would find it very hard to say that that decision was made in the best interest of Nairn. There is unanimous and consistent objections from all the Nairn community councils, and in particular the three Nairn community councils, but obviously Cawdor have got real problems with bypass running and rat running, Aldern have got real problems with rat runs, and even Glenfern is noticing the difference of how much traffic's coming over the Dava that previously used to go in A9. So we're all in this together. We're all saying very clearly this does not make sense. One of our councillors spoke very forcefully against it, but still didn't raise a motion. One of our other councillors was involved in the process. The other one spoke against it, but it didn't seem to carry any weight. And the decision is back to this A96 framework, the Highland Wide Local Development Plan, because it's in that, you can't object to it. Now, these objections are fundamental. They're about the safety of people going under the railway bridge. They're about the safety of the roads. They discussed the road. The chosen road is to go by Michael Drumley and over the railway bridge and down to Delny. To make that safer, they're going to put in 4 extra passing places. It's a very, very dangerous road. Moss Side Road is a very, very dangerous road. Balblair Road is a very, very dangerous road. Corner Road is a very, very dangerous road. And we've had bad accidents and fatalities on all these roads in my time here, so it's not, we're not making this up. There's real arguments about Gordons, and it's really important. I had a long discussion with Ronald Gordon this morning. Gordons is our biggest employer. We need these 100 jobs. These are 100 real manufacturing jobs. This is what actually we want to be doing. We've got tremendous timber. We should be getting the maximum value added to that timber before we send it somewhere else. And that decision, and Gordons feel very strongly about this, that decision, they took all the people on the planning committee, the councillors, up to the site, showed them it, and apart from Michael, it wasn't mentioned at all that morning. So we've got road safety problems, we've got Gordon's problems, there's a whole question of sewage and capacity, and then you're into these other issues I've already talked about schools and number of schools and how that works, and health service and number of clinics or hospitals and how that works. So these are really complicated arguments. So to answer your very simple question, I don't believe it's working in Nairn's best interest at all at the present moment.
At the local planning meeting for the South Nairn decision, local councillor Laurie Fraser asked for a local liaison, lots of locals here, group to be created and regular reviews by the local councillors. Do you think this will have any benefit?
Well, I mean, if it was real and it had real teeth, it would be a benefit, but there's no evidence that it can have any real teeth, and it's very hard to see how it fits into the existing structure. And if we look back at Loch Loy and what was promised at Loch Loy, for example, 25% of the housing was to be local, it was to be affordable, sorry. It's not. The affordable housing was built on a separate site. There was a very clear commitment to building a road bridge over the railway to take traffic back out at the east end, back onto the A96. The Loch Loy Road junction is one of the worst junctions in there, and that's saying something because we've got some really, really bad junctions. So we haven't even, where we had all sorts of things in the plan, actually imposed them or made them happen. Liaison groups mean nothing. A lot of the stuff I'm doing just now around community empowerment and locality planning and health and social integration is saying we have to go back to communities having a real say in what's happening. So if what we're suggesting is we go back to a situation where we had 8 councillors and ideally 8 community councils, and everybody was making decisions based on the quality of information, because one of the things that really worries me, and this Nairn South is a very good example, if the professionals are not giving the quality of advice that the people who are making the decision should be getting, then you're going to get bad decisions. So we have to improve the quality of advice that goes to the councillors. All the evidence I've ever seen is that's much better done on a small local basis, because then you're likely to be able to understand what you're talking about and what you're trying to achieve. And if you go back to this Highland Wide Local Development Plan, they painted this big, big picture, but they didn't think it through. And if the picture was wrong, if their population projections were wrong, if their migration figures were wrong, if their housing needs were wrong, then it's wrong, and it stays wrong. It doesn't get better. So if it's rubbish in, it's rubbish out. So we need to go back to a system where, before the decisions are made, there are proper professional assessments done, that the local opinion has been sought, and if the locals are saying this is a daft idea, then that is really important, because they must have good reasons for saying it's a daft idea. And quite often they're right, it's actually because it is a daft idea. And we can't have a situation where, on bad advice and really quite incompetent at times paperwork, people are making decisions about areas And this is the real crunch of this, where they're not then responsible for what happens. So they can make a decision, and 5 years later, 10 years later, they're out of post, they've got their pensions, they've retired, and the people in Nairn are still living with that bad decision. And it's not going to get any better because the railway bridge hasn't been sorted, the bypass has still not been built, the sewage doesn't work. You know, these are real issues that we need to get a real handle on, and they can only be improved by this mix of statutory responsibility, i.e. what the council and the health board have to do, and how much voluntary, private and charitable input we can have. And that's the direction of travel, that's what community capacity is all about.
So do you think it's too late for a local liaison group for the South Nairn?
Until I saw what it meant, I think it would be like all these liaison groups. They would talk, they would meet 2 or 3 times, and then people would get bored or get fed up, they wouldn't come. It is very much what happened around the Community Care Forum when, if you look back to when it worked, there was a senior GP, a senior social worker and a senior manager, and people came and they brought us real problems and we had to solution. And what I always say at this point, the best example was the parents of children with learning disability, who came and really kicked up a fuss at every meeting I was ever at about what was going to happen to their child if they died or if their child was old enough to move out and get independence. Key housing came along and they stopped coming to the meetings, and they were right, and we needed to provide key housing. So there's something about local accountability and local responsibility, and above all local common sense and local knowledge that makes me think that this is fine if it's real, and if it's a step in the direction of power coming back to Nairnshire, yes. If it's just people going along to say, well, I don't like this or I don't like that, or oh, this is wonderful, nothing will happen, and people will start going out, it'll have no power, it'll have no clout. And equally, if the 4 local councillors are going to have real powers, then these powers have to be devolved to the 4 councillors, and they have to be able to impose the decision that they think is necessary on the developer. So I think there's a very positive thing about a Nairn focus, there's a very positive thing about having a social enterprise, and I think we're seeing over this whole Nairn South procedure the benefit of all the Nairnshire community councils coming together, and one would hope quite soon we'll see the benefit of the Nairn councillors coming together and going back to decisions that are made in the best interest of Nairn.